So friends, let's start by bowing in. And welcome everyone to the course, the Buddhist Path of Awakening. Just a quick announcement that we're now meeting every night from 7 to 7:30 for meditation, 7 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So you're all welcome. And without further ado, I guess, Barry.
Okay. So we have arrived at simplicity, it seems. I'd like to start with, right at the beginning, something he says in the reading is our greatest task in bringing Buddhism to the West is to try to make shamatha, simplicity, the basis of sophisticated prajna activity. Prajna being wisdom. And I just like thinking about it that way, that we're starting at the ground here in the Hinayana with simplicity. And this gives us a way to begin to tread this path so that it can lead to genuine wisdom and wisdom activity. So the heart of our practice is meditation. And the instruction is very simple. Return the attention to the breath. And then from there, can expand to open awareness and then into our daily life. So at the beginning, here in the Hinayana, is where it can start to develop a certain kind of stability, which is grounded in practice. And this is important because it can be easy to develop misunderstandings and become misguided as you go along. So the Kagyu lineage that Chögyam Trungpa was a member of, we follow here, is called the practice lineage. And the Hinayana is a yana of detail. So here we are, we practice paying attention to details. The practice is direct and personal and grounded in our experience. It's actually pretty nuts and bolts at this point. He says in the reading, precision, mindfulness, and simplicity become the source of learning. And that the point of shamatha is to free ourselves from distortion. You see, our neurosis, our ego, distort our understanding and our response to the world. They blind us to what's actually going on, to the vivid immediacy of our existence, and to the effect of our actions. He says to free ourselves physically and psychologically from the three lower realms, the hell realm, hungry ghost, and animal realm, by paying attention to what is happening. That in general, unless we are here, actually fully, truly here, we cannot do anything properly. So this is the ground. Now, these realms are what was covered in a previous class on, I think it was the painful reality of samsara. And I'm not going to go into them here. But I do want to point out that these realms are not, it's important to understand that they're not just some kind of abstract or philosophical thing to contemplate. They are a description of very real experience. I'm going to tell a little story here that I was living in Brooklyn, in Williamsburg, in a loft several years ago, and was standing at a window one day looking out, and it was a sunny day. And below me in the courtyard, between some tenement buildings, I could see a dog laying in the sun, brushing away flies with his tail, and a woman up on a fire escape hanging out laundry. And on the roof of another building, there was a young couple up there hugging each other. There was so much going on, so much life there. And between the buildings, I could see a freighter going by on the East River. And I knew that there were all these people in there. And it was just so, it just struck me. And as I'm watching this, my friend Gary came up and he's standing next to me. And we're both looking out the window, just grooving on this scene. And then Gary says, "Depressing, isn't it?" Now, I don't recall exactly what I said, but boy, that experience made a real impression on me. And I bring it up here because to me, it is such a vivid example of two people looking out the same little window, having such a completely different experience. Each of those experiences coming out of the realm we were inhabiting. I guess I was in some kind of a God realm where everything appeared beautiful, and Gary was in a hell realm. It was dark, depressing, claustrophobic. So, was it really beautiful, what I was seeing, or was it really ugly? You know, the fact is, it wasn't either of those things. It just was what it was. All of that experience was something that we were creating for ourselves. What we experience as reality is actually a limited and distorted view of what is. Now, our neurosis has gotten us into this pickle, and loosening the grip of that neurosis and of the ego is the way out. And that's the project we are engaged in here. And that is undertaken from the ground up, step by step, in sitting meditation and in post meditation. In the reading, he talks about relaxation. And this is important, that relaxation here means allowing yourself to let things be as they are. Seeing things as they are, that you may be feeling that you're not doing it right, or that I'm not presenting this teaching correctly, or anything like that. So this relaxation is about letting that experience be there. It can be part of your meditation, it can be part of your experience, just letting it be. So you can allow experiences to go by like this, that you don't need to defend your territory. Now, Shamatha here is not just about mindfulness in sitting meditation. As the practice develops, it begins to seep into the rest of your life. I know that people I've spoken to here have talked about how they'll just come up in their daily life. It's something reminds you to come back. He says, in pure shamatha, you are just being there constantly, haunted by your mindfulness. I love that. Haunted by your mindfulness. It just keeps coming up. And you keep coming back. So in shamatha, as this goes on, everything becomes workable, no longer bounded by expectations. You could say not ruled by the ego. He says, your mind becomes so transparent, so penetrating and loose that it becomes like a sieve, which is a mind like a sieve. Well, that's because you're open to the fact that everything is changing. There's no need for fixed beliefs or reference points. You can simply be present to what is. And this looseness opens a door for true understanding of the Buddha Dharma. And he says, in fact, that it is necessary. At the same time, awareness is also necessary. That just being present and loosey-goosey cannot be, is not the point here. It's about developing awareness. You see, so shamatha that he's presenting here is the shamatha of daily life. He says in the reading that it is not a practice. It's a way of being. And it's a way of being here fully aware. He says, in order to understand the essence of the teachings, it is necessary to develop constant awareness. And that awareness is based on mindfulness in daily life. It's coming back from dreams to whatever activity you're engaged in, whatever circumstances you find yourself in. And paying attention not in an effortful focus, but by seeing your internal distractions and letting them go and coming back. And being able to do this does depend on putting in the time in sitting meditation. In other readings, he talks about being fully processed. And that's what we're talking about here. We're developing a stable ground. Coming back from thoughts and dreams becomes natural, no longer requires an effort as we are become haunted by mindfulness. Simply being here with nothing to do, ready for anything. That's all I got.
Thank you, Barry. Hold on a second. So, this is worth going over again a bit. It's so profound. It's really the heart of our practice. That shamatha, we have these two practices, shamatha and vipassana. Shamatha literally means abiding in peace, although Trungpa Rinpoche was careful to say that peace is actually a secondary, a byproduct of shamatha. And what shamatha is really about is precision and coming back into the present moment. Vipassana is about awareness. And it's the more advanced practice, but it includes shamatha. You can't do vipassana without shamatha. Because what shamatha is about again and again is coming back from dream into awareness in this present moment. It could be awareness of anything. We use the breath, but you can use a mantra, you can use any object, you could use something that's your glass of water that's sitting in front of you, and you come back to that from dream. Dreams fill our minds. We walk through the streets of our lives dreaming a lot of the time. And these dreams are very repetitive in their themes, habitual. They arise again and again. They are our expressions of our, and actually enactments of our karma, as it's called. The karma that ties us, that binds us, that imprisons us in habitual, distorted mind. And the way they come about is through past experience. We have an experience in the past, and the example that I always give, I made up, is of a child walking down the street with its mother, and the child sees a dog and the mother's window shopping, and she doesn't notice, and it goes up to the dog, and the dog bites the child. It was a mean dog, an aggressive dog, and the child is traumatized. Mother rescues the child. Days, weeks pass. The traumatic event recedes into the child's memory and is no longer present. And one day the child and the mother are walking down the street again. And once again, she's distracted and not noticing. And the child sees a dog in the distance, remembers the previous incident, and is immediately afraid. That dream of the past comes up and colors the way the child sees the present. The mother notices what's going on. She goes up to the owner of the dog, finds out that the dog is friendly, brokers a meeting between the child and the dog. The child discovers that this dog is friendly, playful, licks its face, and that plants another seed in the child's unconscious, if you will. In Buddhism, it's called the Storehouse Consciousness. Freud called it the unconscious. And then the next time the child meets a dog, the third time, it'll have both of those memories going and color the way in which it receives this new dog. That some dogs are aggressive, some dogs are friendly. And this is the way we go through life, with these constant dreams coming up again and coloring the way in which we interpret the world. This is why shamatha, which is the constant practice of coming back from dream, coming back into the present moment. You realize that you're dreaming, and as soon as you realize you're dreaming, you have awoken, just like in the morning, when you wake up and you realize that you were in a dream and you're no longer in it. We do that all the time in our daily lives, if only for an instant. And then a new dream arises. But in that instant, we come back out of that dream and into awareness of what is going on in the present. This is the point of shamatha. And the practice is one of shifting our loyalty from the dreams to awareness in the present moment. That awareness is always with us. It's just covered over by the dreaming from time to time. And when those dreams clear, when the clouds part, here we are, wherever we are. So when he talks about in precision and intelligence of prajna has the meaning true of being of wisdom, transcendent wisdom, but it also means sheer intelligence, even intellectual intelligence. And at its lowest level, it means cleverness. But what he's referring to here is the ability that we can have to move through our lives intelligently, not seeing them through these veils, which Barry described as being accurately as the 6 realms. These are the realms of existence. These are different styles of dreaming. We tend to develop a monolithic style that colors our lives. So for instance, if we're an animal, we tend to go sort of just stupidly through life, plunging ahead, plowing ahead like a pig, eating anything that comes in front of it. Hell beings see threats everywhere. And you can see hell beings sometimes, especially on the streets of Manhattan, where I lived for the last 20 years, people walking along screaming and talking to themselves. They're living in a dream. That's an extreme version of the hell realm. And then there's the jealous God realm. I always like that one. That's the realm that sees the possibility of heaven. Other people have it. I don't, but I'm going to get it. And you become a warrior, storming the gates of heaven, wanting what the gods have, the wealth, the pleasure. All of these are dream distortions. And shamatha is the constant act, profoundly, trivially, however we do it, of realizing that we're dreaming and coming back. I thought at one point, I had a favorite movie called Night of the Hunter years ago. It's about this evil preacher who has love and hate tattooed on his knuckles. And it was a dark film noir. I thought of having come back tattooed, or at least written in ballpoint pen on my knuckles, come back. And we used to do things like that back in the old days here in Boulder. Come back. It's the beginning. It's profound. It's shamatha. Shamatha is all about coming back from dream and seeing this world, beginning to see it, stripped of the dream. Just bare, naked, bare attention, it's called. In the Theravada tradition, they call this practice bare attention. The other practice, vipassana, which is Barry talked about, is called, usually translated, that word is superior seeing. Hlak tong in Tibetan means literally superior seeing. And what's superior about it is that having come back from dream, now we can expand our awareness and see this world, this space that we inhabit, panoramically, easily, without effort. It's here all the time, this awareness. More than that, because we are giving up dreams. Dreams are always rooted in the past and the future. You can even have dreams about the present, in which you objectify and turn the present into a thing. And in the advanced Tibetan teachings, they warn about that. And they say that the real experience of the present, they call it the 4th moment, because it's not objectified, it's living. It's this, it's alive. And so we come back in shamatha, and then we begin to see this world as it truly is, stripped of those dreams of the past, the future, those value judgments, those fears and hopes, like the child afraid of the dog, hoping for a friendly dog. We see the world as it is. And the phrase in Sanskrit is ta ta ta, as it is. We go to as it is. And in doing this, we transform our world. And this is where the Buddhist teachings become extraordinarily profound. It leads all the way through the Mahayana and into Tantra, the Vajrayana. And the world takes on a different shape, because in the confused world, we feel that we are moving through a world of things, people, rocks, chairs, clouds, sounds, smells, tastes, that these things actually have a true existence. But they don't. In the Dzogchen teachings, the highest teachings, they say that all things are rootless from the base. Rootless from the base. They have no true foundation. They are just images in a mirror. Images on your computer screen. And when you turn away, it's gone. When you come back, when you turn off your computer, it vanishes. These sounds come out of this mouth and you hear them for an instant and they're gone. Everything is a constant presentation. And it's a kind of magic. It's a kind of beauty, of vividness, lucid, vivid, meaningful, truly meaningful, in the sense that everything is communicating to each one of us just what it is. Rinpoche used to say, when you hold a rock in your hand, you're holding a mountain. It's the quality of earth, the weight of the rock. And when you see steam rising from a steam kettle, it has the quality of clouds in the sky. That everything is communicating just what it is vividly, but we tend not to see it. Sorry. So shamatha is so important. It's the first step. It's half the battle, because we are beginning to come back and shift our loyalty from dreams, the hopes, the fears, the past, the future, to this. And in doing this, we begin to develop vipassana, awareness, superior seeing, and the world begins to change. We begin to discover what in the teachings they call the twofold egolessness, meaning the lack of true existence of anything. It's twofold because it's the lack of true existence of what we call I, which is just a statement, a story we tell ourselves about the past and the future, in which I is the hero or the heroine, and other. We think that this thing exists, that glass, that screen, that person, but it's just an appearance coming and going in the moment, in the instant. As soon as it arises, it's passing. You can't even find it for a second enduring. This world is described in two ways, and he mentions one of them in one of these readings, shunyata. Shunyata in Sanskrit, it means emptiness. Shunya is empty, ta is a nominative, turns it into a noun. Tong Yi in Tibetan. And what is it empty of? It's empty of any true being that we can imagine, that we fix on it. Nothing has any true being. Nothing has any true existence. It's all an arising and passing away in the moment. This idea of true existence only lives in the stories that we tell ourselves about the past and the future. And so this process is one of waking up from dream, coming back into the present, our real lives, full of blood and breath and love and hate and all of those things. Coming back into this real world from dream and experiencing it vividly, empty, constantly communicating, full of true compassion. Not compassion in the sense of feeling sorry for. That's baloney from the Buddhist point of view. What compassion really means is love, the heat of participation and love with all of us. And so this first chapter is probably the most important of the ones that we read. He says, your sitting practice provides a kind of anchor to start with. It anchors you, it pulls you back out of dream. And in post-meditation, that means when you get up from your cushion, from your chair, and you begin to walk out into the world, and if you can remember to come back just as you did when you were sitting, then it becomes real. It becomes part of your actual life. that you're shifting your loyalty to the real world. He says it's not really religious, it's natural behavior, this practice of shamatha. In the next chapter, he says meditation is about experiencing reality and being real. Same thing, here we go. And then here's another one, a key point in all of this process is to develop sympathy for yourself. That's the whole point about neurosis. We are being so hard on ourselves. We are so critical of ourselves in our dreams because we think, I'm not good enough. I have to be better. And we imagine being insufficient and that someday we'll be okay in the future. Again, the past and the future, dream. And it's so hard on ourselves. Whenever you think, I could improve, you're telling yourself, I'm not good enough. It's mean. It's harsh. It's cruel. And so in our meditation practice, if we sit there and we think, I'm not a good meditator, I need to try harder. There it is again. That kind of cruelty. And what we begin to do is to simply see, watch our minds as we sit on our cushions or in our chairs. And we see the thoughts arising and passing. As though, like a Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche says, watching an old person watching children at play. And when you begin to do that, there's a kind of kindness to it, like an old person might feel towards the children he or she is watching. And we watch our own minds with a kind of kindness. And that kindness can become real joy, the joy of accepting, giving up that nasty agenda of self-improvement, which is so harsh, so cruel, and we do it to ourselves. So we begin to develop sympathy for ourselves. Sympathy here means that we are willing and able to see whatever arises in our experience internally and externally without judgment, letting it be as it is. And those are the two areas that we practice. Internally, our cognizance, and externally, the phenomenal world. And we watch it all, internal and external, arise and pass away. And to the extent that we can do it without wishing it were otherwise, without wishing to improve it, we develop sympathy and kindness for ourselves. And that's so important because that's where the joy that he talks about later comes in. That pleasure of self-acceptance. We are so harsh with ourselves. And in those moments of self-acceptance, there can be a real feeling of delight. Kindness can bring tears to your eyes almost. And also, there's that old slogan that kindness begins at home. If you want to be able to be truly kind to others, you have to be able to be kind to yourself. So the three aspects of sitting practice. First is posture, having good head and shoulders. We're not animals. I said that this morning. I was thinking of this reading. He says we're not dudro. The word is, it's spelled here T-U-T-D-R-O. Dudro is the word for animal, and it means walking on all fours with your head down like this. Human beings sit erect. And in doing so, this is the posture of awakening, of enlightenment, of awakening from what? Awakening from dreams. So we have good head and shoulders, as Trungpa Rinpoche used to say, like this. Your head's erect, upright. Your spine is straight. Your shoulders are back a little bit. To the extent that we can, especially if we get older, it gets harder, huh? Because our bodies deform. Then the technique is to be spacious and not wait for anything. Don't expect anything from your practice. It's not punishment or reward. It's what it is. And it can be lonely and alone because we are not looking for any kind of confirmation. We're just doing the practice, being here. And finally, there's joy, which comes with a sense of humor. That's the hardest part for me. To cheer up, to actually cheer up and be cheerful about the whole thing. So essential. If we're serious and solemn and hardworking and we're going to get somewhere, and it's like that story I told last time about the, the yogi and the guy singing and dancing under the tree, and the yogi buried up to his neck in sand, full of ants, and trying to get enlightened. We have to learn how to relax into joy and appreciation of our lives. And we do this in our practice. He says what we're doing has a purpose. And that's a two-edged sword, actually. Because if you have a purpose of self-improvement, that doesn't cut it. But you can have the purpose of letting go of purpose, of just coming back into sheer, easy awareness and appreciation of this present moment. That's the real purpose in Buddhism, is the letting go of that self-aggrandizing purpose. When I was a child, my father, I used to ride in the car and he would tell me stories. He told me the story of the wiffle bird, which I think of as a metaphor for this. The wiffle bird is a bird that flies in ever decreasing circles until it disappears up its own anus. That's kind of Buddhist practice. We come at it self-consciously, and the practice is to let go of that self-consciousness and to just simply come back into awareness. And every time we judge ourselves, we stand back and we say, am I doing it? Am I not doing it? Or we're not. And then we let go and we come back and we relax into this awareness of the present moment. He says motivation has to do with faith, tepa, which is connected with joy and humor. These are so essential, joy and humor. Without them, we're serious, self-aggrandizing, self-improving sufferers. But with joy and humor, you just let it go. He says here, meditation is not at all goal-oriented. Isn't that amazing? Not goal-oriented. And yet we're going to do it for hours and hours and hours and years and months in our lives. And it's not goal-oriented. The fact that you have no idea of what is going to happen, no real idea about the goal, seems to be the saving grace. Because basically, when it comes, this idea, this appreciation of the present moment, it's so fresh, so real, so new. It couldn't be pre-thought. So basically, our motivation is the willingness to give in, the willingness to be open and work hard, to give in to what? To give in to this present moment, our lives as they take place now. It's a huge shift in loyalty and in orientation. When we're confused, when our loyalty is to samsara, to self-aggrandizement, then we have all these reference points. Yes, I was here, I'm going there, I know where I am, what my journey is. But when we let go into reality, we let go of all those reference points. The idea of a journey from here to there, of becoming better. All that goes. And we have to let go and float free, become a citizen of the universe, of the cosmos. And then he talks about cheering up. There's a whole section to it. We're all crazy. How do we get out of that? Purely by sitting. Mindfulness practice depends on your cheerfulness. I mean, if we're sitting down and we're going, "Oi, I gotta work harder," you know, that flail, it's just not the way. It's sad. The more relaxation and humor there is, he says, the more you begin to understand. There is less chatter due to the very fact that you don't suppress yourself. And you do this by means of sitting practice. And then this terrific thing, I never have heard this before. He says, I'm going to read this whole thing. When the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree, he wasn't tormenting himself. He was enjoying himself. Really? For 6 years, he had a great time. The only time he had any second thoughts was when he spent 40 days, that was after his enlightenment, wondering how he could communicate the joy that he had experienced. He was not sure how people could be made to understand such joy and wakefulness. So after his enlightenment, he spent 40 days wandering, feeling that he probably couldn't communicate this, until he met with 4 formerly fellow yogis. And at first they thought, well, he's fallen off the path. Then they took a second look and they realized something was different. And they asked him to give teachings. This was outside of what's now Varanasi. And he took them into a place called the Jeta Grove, not the Jeta Grove, I'm sorry. I've forgotten the name of it, senior moment. But he gave them the teachings of the Four Noble Truths, which was the first teaching. So there's no way that one can attain freedom without sitting practice. Because why? Because it's one thing that constantly, what's the word? Frustrates ego. Ego wants entertainment. Ego wants dreams. Ego wants stories. Good stories, bad stories, any kind of story that will entertain it. And sitting practice is all about giving up entertainment, that entertainment of thought, and coming back to simple, clear awareness in the present moment. He says that meditation practice has to be considered the highlight of your day, the most important thing you can do. I think we ought to stop here. There's so much, this is so profound, and we'll maybe do the last 2 chapters that were assigned. It was kind of an experiment to assign that much. Do them next week. I hope that's okay with everybody. And we could have a discussion. The importance of shamatha and of meditation altogether. I found it so irritating back in the day when I listened to Trungpa Rinpoche say, meditation is the only way. And I was thinking, oh God, this sounds like some kind of fundamentalist. Now I think he's absolutely right, because it's what meditation is the contravention of ego and its constant desire for self-aggrandizement, self-entertainment.
Philip has a question, I think.
Okay.
Thank you. And thanks for all of the teaching. This is great, and I really appreciate it. With this particular question, you may want to roll it over into next week because it's coming from a couple of pages further, but maybe this is the place to ask it. So I was hoping if you could sort of create an overall structure. Later on page 189, when he's talking about breathing in particular and mindfulness, he's talking about there are different styles of breathing belonging to different levels of meditation practice, and references, of course, shamatha and vipassana. And then he references is Mahavipassana,
Many more.
and Shunyata. And I'm wondering if either now or next time you could put this into an overarching scheme and maybe even include Tonglen and the practice that we're doing here. How do these things all relate to each other and blend one into the next?
Shamatha, we can deal with it here. Shamatha involves concentration on an object. And if you are practicing shamatha with the breath, you most likely have your eyes closed. You don't have to, but you might. If you're practicing vipassana, eyes are open. When you practice with your eyes closed, there's an interiority. You tend to feel very interior. And so there's a feeling of greater effort, of some greater self-awareness. And you work with the breath, the awareness of the breath coming in and going out, coming in and going out. And so you feel the breath coming up, it goes out, you count one. You watch it come back in, you can feel it as it comes in and out of your body. It comes in cooler, it goes out warmer because it's been in your lungs. And it goes out through your nose or your lips. So it's there's all this precision and detail in pure shamatha, having to do with focus on the breath. Vipassana has nothing to do with the breath, pure vipassana. It's awareness practice. We can do it right now. Here you are. You're aware of your environment. 360 degrees, figuratively speaking. Figuratively. But there's this feeling of wide open awareness because you see the awareness and the space are one. They're not different. Now, when we do work with the out breath, going out into that space, we are combining shamatha and vipassana. The focus on the breath as it goes out is the shamatha aspect. It brings us back from dream. As it goes out and dissolves into the space, it brings us into this panoramic awareness. That's the vipassana aspect. So that really, in a nutshell, is working with the breath through those two practices. Now, vipassana, pure vipassana, is simply awareness. And it goes from the beginning to the very, very end of the path. This path is broken up into different stages, descriptions. The first is, as Barry mentioned, the Hinayana. Yana means vehicle. Hina means lesser, although Trungpa Rinpoche preferred foundational vehicle. The next major division is called the Mahayana, the great vehicle. And beyond that is the Vajrayana, the indestructible vehicle. And we move through these experientially. Now, as our understanding, our real understanding develops, we actually become Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana practitioners, really. But we can do the practices of these things in advance. We can do Vajrayana practices with a Hinayana mind, Mahayana practices with a Hinayana mind, and so forth. But the three things that characterize these three stages of the path, the Hinayana is characterized by shamatha and beginning vipassana meditation, by the development of prajna in the sense of intellect, sharpness, beginning to understand the teachings and how they describe our lived experience. And it begins to develop compassion in this sense that we begin to suffer less at the Hinayana stage of the path. And we begin to do less harm to others. Why? Because we are letting those impulses go in our meditation and we're coming back to simple awareness in the present moment. Additionally, at that stage of the path, we discover what's called the 1.5-fold egolessness, meaning really what it means is we begin to discover that I, this thing we've been telling ourselves about, we tell ourselves all the time, I. is just a story that arises in this space from time to time, a lot of the time, especially in the beginning. But then it goes, and here we are, we're in this space. And there is no I, there is no story. And then it comes up again. And as we begin to realize that, we begin to shift our allegiance from those stories about I, which are so fraught with hope and fear, with good and bad, from that to this awareness, this groundless, no reference point, open awareness. And when that becomes really powerful, that open awareness, that is the entrance into the Mahayana. And then the doctrine of emptiness becomes all important. And the emptiness is the utter inexistence of I and other, that they're just part of those stories. And this, the Mahayana, really is the escape from suffering altogether. But it still has a focus on that escape, which is suspicious. Another kind of subtle egotism, self-aggrandizement, escaping from suffering. And so the Mahayana practitioner is too focused on that freedom, the freedom from I and other, which is shunyata. And the whole Mahayana path is a wearing out of that. I'm simplifying a lot. And the entrance into the Vajrayana is when one realizes and actually achieves enlightenment that this world is truly, as it arises now, the real deal. And that that's all there is. And that the rest was dream, fiction, lie, untruth. And then one begins to really appreciate this world in all its color and vividness. One's no longer fixated on escaping from suffering. Instead, there's just constant awareness. And then the Vajrayana is all about the beauty, the color, the meaningfulness of this world as it arises in the present moment. And by meaningfulness, I don't mean that it's telling us, that giving us a path, some goal-oriented meaningfulness. It's that everything is meaningful in its own right, telling us what it is loudly, vividly, beautifully. It's self-meaning. And then one begins to live in the world of the Vajrayana, which is the enlightened world. This is a quick overview of what you can spend and the rest of your life and lives to come studying, and working on as we progress through these paths. And the key starts with sitting meditation. Because it's the one fail-safe opponent of ego and confusion. And what makes it fail-safe is that it doesn't involve entertainment. In fact, it's boring. If you want to say that, ultimately, it's not even that. It's as it is. We just learn how to sit. We start with shamatha, coming back from dream into the present moment. That's a huge undertaking, profound. And then we begin to develop superior seeing, the ability to see all these things in the world, the egolessness of I and other, which is shunyata, which he mentions briefly. When you come completely present, there's no room for I when we're awake, present. It disappears, and the world begins to look different in glimpses at first, for most people. Everybody's different on this. And then we begin to move into the Vajrayana, which is the appreciation of the beauty and vividness and meaningfulness of this world as it arises in the present moment. It's not meaningful for if you do this, you're going to get that. It's meaningful because that flower communicates its floweriness. That rock communicates the quality of earth. That cup of water communicates the oceans, to us. So it's quite a path. And the interesting thing is that Vipassana, which we are practicing now as we go out with the breath dissolves, and then here we are. That practice goes all the way through to the end of the path. There are other practices that come along that are very profound and deep, but that one continues. It just changes its name. At the Mahayana level, it becomes Shunyata practice. At the Vajrayana level, it becomes Mahamudra, great symbol practice. Or it becomes, at the Dzogchen level, cutting through. It's called Trekchit. And it's the same damn thing. It's just a matter of how deep it goes, how thoroughly we give into it, we relax into it, we become it. And then how thoroughly, as we do that, the world changes. Because when you change your mind, you change the world. Hell beings see this world as a constant, horrible threat, full of hatred and fear. Enlightened beings, who knows? But they're not seeing it in terms of the six realms, that's for sure. Seeing it as a constant arising presentation. They say that the great yogis spend their lives juggling the sun and moon. What that means is there's constant play. In fact, the term is play, rolpa in Tibetan. That's what one does. Nothing left to do except play. I remember Trungpa Rinpoche once said that when he died, he didn't want to come back as a teacher again. He wanted to come back as a Japanese scientist. This was back in the heyday of Matsushita and Sony. It's that mentality of wanting to play, wanting to be curious and explore. So thank you. That's a profound question you asked, Philip. Really opened up.
Thank you so much. That's a very lucid answer.
Our shamatha practice is so profound. It's taken me years and years to realize. He used to say to us, just do it. It works. But if you sit there and you look and you say, well, I'm getting this out of it and I didn't get anything today, but maybe tomorrow or yesterday I got some out of it, and you're sort of constantly judging it, you just make it really hard for yourself. One does. Because actually what he said is true. It just works. And if you sit and do it, irregardless, that's not a word, regardless of what you are hoping for or fearing for in your practice, it has an effect. It has its effect. And suddenly at some point you realize, wow, I've changed. The practice has changed me. I've heard it so many times from people and in my own experience. It sort of comes at you silently from behind. You don't notice it. And then one day you do.
Or someone else tells you you've changed.
Yeah, that can happen too. Definitely. Definitely. Yeah.
Oh, Steph, I think, has a question.
It really seems almost as if we need a different vocabulary to talk about these experiences. I think as I am becoming more acquainted with these things, I'm getting that I hesitate to say what we're aiming for because that sounds egotistical. I hesitate to say what our objective is because that sounds egotistical. But there is a reason that we're doing this. And I think that what I'm understanding is that the purpose of sitting is to have no purpose, because almost anything that we designate in that way comes from our ego. And the lens of the ego is what interferes with us seeing, for want of a better word, reality. It is what comes between us and experiencing the present, the totality, and the fail-safe way of breaking through the shell of ego that is between us and that is by taking away everything that ego feeds on. Like, well, I'm going to meditate this long today, and I want to accomplish this, and I hope that I'll have that, and I'm going to be enlightened by the end of the year. But by sitting and being bored and focusing on your breath, you're really blocking ego's access to this little piece of your life. And I think that maybe if you do that and you get used to the alternative, maybe that alternative can start to expand. Would that be, am I understanding this?
Well said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well said. Yeah, we each have to go through this in our own ways, coming to this understanding of what it means to give up ego and confusion and suffering, and how to truly appreciate our lives in this world as they arise in this present moment. It's so groundless. That's what makes it hard. We want a reference point, but it's groundless.
Yeah.
Yeah. We really are space travelers.
Mm.
So we should all practice together. It's wonderful. We could experience joy and camaraderie. And we're a band of space travelers. Yeah. Ed.
That I don't want to derail the conversation, but the 40 days struck me, and I keep going back. As most of us were raised in the Judeo-Christian tradition, 40 days is a number that keeps appearing, and I was kind of puzzled as to why would it appear in Buddhism as well. And then as you were speaking tonight, I kind of contrasted the if you there's a crummy way of saying it, the Buddhist spin as opposed to the Judeo-Christian spin. So think of the 40 days. You have Moses on the mountain, right? What he was receiving something from outside, externally. He was getting the 10 Commandments from God. And when he finished, it was a pretty bad scene with the golden calf and all that. And then Noah in the ark, again, he was told by an external force that to preserve the race and animal kingdom, he had to go through a terrible storm. Then you get Jesus in the desert, again, who went through a terrible internal storm in trying to decide what he was supposed to do with his life, and ultimately ended up getting crucified. But from how it's described, the Buddha was puzzled, perhaps, during his 40 days, and it was totally an internal exercise where 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 he found frustration at inability to communicate, and the violence that we find in the Bible, I would suspect is absent. And uh, I, I just leave that out there as a thought, and invite any comments.
Any comments?
I see Jane.
Okay. Jane?
Jane, you have to unmute yourself.
Jane, are you speaking? I see your mouth moving.
You have to unmute yourself, Jane.
Or maybe just speak louder.
Yeah, no. I'm muted. My whole internet is not operating, so I'm on my little tiny iPhone, and it's different. Anyway, Ed, I was struck also by the meaning of these 40 days, and of course, looked at the idea of wandering in the desert for 40 days to find oneself, and maybe the externalization of God's punishment, or the rain in the Noah's Ark, is something like when we hear the lineage myths of externalizing that inner turmoil and the need for a quest, a process, whether it's sitting or wandering through the desert or being on a ship in a storm. I see it as all the same thing, that the externalization of somebody else telling us, we've been bad, we have to be punished, or telling us, here's the truth, guys, it's in these 10 precepts, 10 commandments. We've got the same thing in many of the different practices and religions, and it's to internalize all this, and it takes time. I mean, 40 years could be 400 years, or John might say 400 lifetimes. I see it as all the same thing.
Interesting. Yeah. Meg?
So you talk a lot about the idea of being caught up in self-guilt, or like I originally come to meditation as a way of self-improvement, which I understand now is